Hi there, I'm Mary Susie from Bead Me a Story. Thanks so much for joining me today. We will be making the Not Again beaded bracelet. I showed you how to do Not Again weave last week using square wire jump rings and round jump rings. This week we're using all round jump rings, but we're also going to be adding beads to the outsides of this weave, and I think it's really a pretty weave this way. I used 4mm cube beads. These happen to be Toho cube beads. You can also use my Yuki cube beads in the 4mm size. You can use almost any size 6 seed bead. You can use size 5 triangle beads, and most of the size 5 seed beads will work. So, you can really have a lot of fun with this and use a lot of different kinds of beads. I thought it'd be interesting to use the cubes because you get this hard edge on the outside, but really anything in the size 5 or 6 in the seed bead realm is going to work great for this. So, feel free to experiment and do all sorts of fun things with this. I think you're going to have a great time. It's a really easy weave. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so in order to start this chain, the first thing we want to do is prep our supplies. So basically we're using 18 gauge 3/16 jump rings here and here, and then 20 gauge 3/16 jump rings. And you'll notice I have some closed ones that already have the beads on them, and I have some open ones. So you're going to take the amount that you need to use to make the proper length of the bracelet, and you're going to open half. Actually, you're going to need to open all of the 20 gauge jump rings, and then half of them you can go ahead and put the bead on and close those jump rings to have these ready for our initial chain. And then with our 18 gauge, we're going to open half of them and close half of them. Okay, and what we're basically going to do here is make a 2 by 1 by 2 by 1 by 2 by 1 by 2 chain. And I have a smaller jump ring here. You can probably use a 20 gauge 7/64 or a 20 gauge 1/8, something in that area to attach your end to. So I'm using a paper clip right now, but you can go ahead and attach it to your clasp. I just find this easier to show you in a video how to do this if I put it on a paper clip to start with. Okay, so I'm just using this smaller jump ring to go ahead and attach my first row. Now what I want to do with this first row is I want to make sure that this is oriented with the 20 gauge jump ring sitting away from and above the 18 gauge jump ring. So see how it's kind of sitting on top of it? And then my bead is going to be away from me. Okay, and we're going to continue that as we make this 2 by 2 chain the whole length. Okay, so I'm going to come up through my 18 gauge jump ring, up through the 20 gauge jump ring with the bead, and then I'm going to pick up a new 20 gauge with a bead and an 18 gauge closed ring. Okay, and then when I put this down, I'll just point out that this new row is oriented the same way. So again, I want to go ahead and take one of my open 18 gauge jump rings. I'm going to come up through the 18 gauge, up through the 20 gauge, pick up a new 20 gauge, and I'll just point out when I put this through here, this kind of locks this bead into place. That's when that happens. That's when the bead doesn't move anymore. Okay, and I'll close my jump ring. Okay, this is very simple stuff. Just one more time. Okay, take my open 18 gauge jump ring, come up through the 18 gauge jump ring, come up through the 20 gauge jump ring, pick up the 20 gauge with the bead, pick up the 18 gauge, and close the jump ring. Okay, and then just keep doing that until you've used up all of your closed jump rings. Okay, we want this to run the whole length that we need. Okay, and then see how this one isn't locked in place yet because I haven't started a new row, but you can see that all of my 20 gauge jump rings are sitting on top of the 18 gauge, and that the square beads are on the outside of the chain. Okay, so you can see that I have my chain complete here. You can see all the beads are facing away from me. I have 2 jump rings by 1 jump ring by 2 jump rings by 1 jump ring. So what we're going to be doing with this next part is we're going to be joining like row 1 to row 3, row 3 to row 5, and so on and so forth. Okay, and we'll be doing that. What we have remaining is our 20 gauge jump rings that don't have a bead on them. We're going to just add those as we add to this chain. But what we're going to end up with is just a 2x2 chain. It's just going to have a really cool orientation to it. And that's what makes up this weave. Okay, so you can see I've taken a bead and I have gone ahead and picked it up onto the 20 gauge jump ring. Now what I want to do is I want to come up through the 18 gauge jump ring, and the 20 gauge jump ring that's above it, we need to come down through that, okay, from top to bottom. And then I'm going to skip this row that's our in-between row, that's what we're adding on to, and we're going to go down through the 18 gauge jump ring of row 3. Now I've closed my jump ring, and I'll let you see where that is now. Okay, so see how the bead's sitting on the outside, on the opposite side from where we had our beads before. Okay, so I'm going to take another one. I'm going to take a 20 gauge jump ring, pick up a bead. I'm going to come up through the row 3 jump ring, the 18 gauge jump ring. I'm going to go down through the 20 gauge jump ring, however you need to do that, however you need to make that happen, and then down through the 18 gauge jump ring of row 5. Alright, and that is another one added. So we're just going to keep going with this. I want to do a couple more rows, and then I want to show you something interesting that happens with this. Okay, so this was row 5, up through the 18 gauge, down through the 20 gauge, cross over to that next row, and down through the 18 gauge of that row. So this goes pretty quick. This is a fast little project. I really like it with the beads. So let me just mention about the beads. I am using Toho cubes on this, 4mm. They run a little bit larger than the Miyuki cubes, just so you know that. You could also use 5mm, or I'm sorry, you could use size 5 beads. So let's say like triangle beads, or I know there's some pearls that come in a size 5. So basically size 6 or size 5 beads are going to work great here. You just want to choose a bead that's large enough where it's not going to fall through, you know, be able to work its way through between the jump rings and get out of place once you're wearing it. Okay, so up through the 18 gauge, down through the 20 gauge, and down through the 20 gauge of the next odd number row. We're just going to keep doing this the whole way down the chain until everything is linked together. Okay. But now that we have a few rows, I want to show you something about this. So last week I showed you how to do this just with jump rings and no beads, nothing special about it. And you get this really cool linking between the 20 gauge jump rings that you're adding, and that's all fine and good. This is very pretty on this side. But when we add beads to this, this is actually the side I would wear this on. And this creates a really cool effect, because what you get is your 18 gauge jump rings are creating this little back and forth in the center of the chain, and then the beads can all kind of lay down flat against your wrist. So this is the better orientation when you're doing the beaded version of this, but it looks really cool. I really love how it turned out, and I think you're going to really like it too. Okay, so let's flip this back over. So this will be the back side now. Now you know that we are working this weave on the back side. Let's get our chain laid back out where our beads are away from us, and we will go ahead and continue adding our jump ring with bead and crossing over, working with all the odd number rows, which are all the rows that have 2 jump rings. We're going to cross over our single rows, which are all the rows that only have a single jump ring right now, and then down through the next odd row just through the 18 gauge jump ring. So just to say that in a different way, but of course if you haven't caught on yet, you can always back up the video and go back to when I started adding this row. Okay, so I'm going to finish this part up, adding all of my beads to this side of the chain, and then I'll be back to show you how to attach the clasp. Okay, so now you can see that I've reached the end of the chain, and there's one last thing that we want to look at here. So you can see that on this side, the very first bead that we see is at the top. And of course this chain, we're making it on the bias. So this is a little left of this one, and then we go here, here, here. So this is a little bit slanted. And so when we reach the end, what we want to pay attention to is we have a bead on the top at the start and a bead at the top at the end. So in order to make this more even, let's go ahead and add a final row to this so that we can have our very final bead down on the bottom rather than top to top, because this extends, the top of the bracelet is longer than the bottom, so we want these to be the same. So all I'm going to do is I am going to just pass an 18 gauge jump ring through in the same way that I've always been doing it, coming up through the 18 gauge, up through the 20 gauge, and then this one I'm just going to close. You don't have to do anything besides that. Okay, and then I'm going to take one of my 20 gauge jump rings with a bead, because of course our goal here is to have the bead end at the bottom. And for this row, I'm going to come up through my 18 gauge, come back down through this 20 gauge that's above it, okay, and then there's no new row to attach it to, so we're just going to close. And we're going to use our end pieces to finish this off, and that'll of course lock this bead in place. And I did a terrible job closing this jump ring, so let me fix it really quick. Okay, now to finish our end, all we have to do is we're going to take our small jump rings again. Remember we talked about these at the beginning. I'm going to use 2 on the end, and I'm just going to pass down through these last 2 jump rings that I just added on. Okay, and remember that we're still looking at the back side of this, so we're going to end up flipping this over. I will once I add the second one. So I like to add 2 here just so that my ring that I put at the end has a little bit more strength to hold it onto here. Okay, but you want these to be small because they, you know, you don't want them sticking way up out of your bracelet. So let me flip this over so you can see what this finished piece looks like. It looks a whole lot different on the other side because now the blue is much more dominant than the green that we have in this. I'm going to take one last jump ring. These are my 18 gauge jump rings, and I'm going to pass through these 2 rings to make an end loop. Okay, so that's one end, and on our other end we have this paper clip. I like using paper clips because I can just slide everything off, but I am still going to have to reopen this jump ring. Okay, and then we'll just take our lobster clasp, pop it through there and close, and we are done. Okay, and this is what our final chain looks like. I think this is really beautiful, and I like that when I showed you this chain without the beads, that we were looking at it from this side, and we were taking advantage of all these beautiful links that we get with these smaller jump rings in between. But now with the beads on, you can see they almost want to curl up slightly. You could wear it on this side, but I think it looks a lot better on this side, and you get that play of the blue in the middle going back and forth, and then all of your beads are just sitting on the outside, almost like a charm bracelet. So it's a really pretty weave. As I said, you can use other size 6 or size 5 beads on this. You can use any kind of beads you'd like. We're using pretty large 20 gauge jump rings, so that means it's going to fit through most of the holes. You shouldn't have many problems with choices here, and I think you'll really enjoy wearing this. So thank you so much for joining me today. Please be sure to like and follow us on YouTube, and of course all of the supplies that you saw here are available at Bead Me a Story, and we will also have some kits of this available if you'd prefer to have this with the written and photo instructions, plus it comes with all the materials you need to just simply make this up without having to make a lot of choices. Thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.